The rain hammered against the thick plate glass of the Diplomat's Grill, a venerable institution where deals were sealed, careers were launched, and legends occasionally dined. Inside, the atmosphere was a contradiction. Heavy velvet drapes absorbed the sound of the city, yet the air was charged with a nervous energy, thick as the smoke from an expensive Cuban cigar. The scent of polished mahogany and aged cognac mingled with the low, continuous tink-tink-tink of ice in crystal glasses. This was not merely a dinner, it was the wrap party for a troubled, high-budget picture, a meal celebrating success that had yet to be proven. At the head of a long, dark table sat the centerpiece of the evening, the 80-something-year-old titan Clint Eastwood. He wasn't loud. He rarely was. His presence was a gravitational pull, absorbing light and sound. His eyes, famously narrowed against the harsh sun of 1,000 westerns, held the kind of silence that suggests profound observation. He was dressed simply, impeccably, a pillar of old-school gravitas in a room full of fleeting trends. The tension, however, was generated by the man across from him, Leo Vance. Leo was the director, young, successful, aggressively modern. He represented the new guard, all flash, speed, and digital metrics. He spoke with the volume of someone who expected his words to be quoted immediately on Twitter. 1. The sensory hook. The soft jazz piano paused just as Leo leaned forward, interrupting the quiet discussion about box office forecasts. Everyone at the table froze, sensing the turn. Leo had been drinking too much of the celebratory champagne. His eyes, bright with competitive arrogance, fixed on Clint. He didn't realize he was about to make the most expensive mistake of his career. "Look, Mr. Eastwood," Leo began, his voice cutting through the dining room's refined murmur. He used the formal title, but the tone was dripping with condescension. "We all respect your legacy, truly, but let's be honest. The landscape has changed. Your methods, the slow pace, the emphasis on practical effects, the silence," he gestured dismissively. "It's archaic. It simply doesn't resonate with the 24/7 engagement metrics we require now." A producer nervously cleared his throat. A waiter, placing a plate of seared scallops, nearly dropped the dish. The entire atmosphere shifted from celebratory hum to absolute, paralyzing stillness. Every eye in the restaurant, from the power agents whispering in the corner to the elderly couple celebrating an anniversary, drifted toward the table. Clint Eastwood remained motionless. He didn't blink. He didn't shift in his chair. He simply held Leo's gaze, the way a master hunter holds the eye of a confused, cornered rabbit. This was not a moment of anger. It was a moment of profound, cold disappointment. Nobody expected that quiet night in the Diplomat's Grill to change everything. 2. The injustice. The attack. Leo misinterpreted the silence as defeat. He saw the stillness as evidence of the old man's diminished capacity, mistaking quiet strength for weakness. Fueled by champagne and the belief that he was educating a dinosaur, Leo pressed his attack, harder and more publicly. "I had to fight the studio tooth and nail to keep your screen time down," Leo boasted, loudly enough for the entire staff to hear. "The data showed that audiences under 30 prefer rapid cuts, constant stimulation. We needed momentum. Frankly, your approach slows everything down. You're a liability, Mr. Eastwood. A magnificent, iconic liability, but a liability nonetheless." He paused for dramatic effect, leaning back slightly, expecting applause or at least nervous agreement. Clint said nothing. He simply reached for the small water glass in front of him, lifted it to his lips, and took a slow, deliberate sip. The sound of the glass meeting the mahogany table upon return was unnervingly loud in the sudden, deep hush. Leo felt the pressure of the silence. It wasn't a comfortable silence. It was judgmental, heavy. It was the weight of 1,000 yards of open prairie, judged by a man who understood patience and persistence. To counter the pressure, Leo became louder, more aggressive, trying to fill the void with noise. "I'm trying to help you, sir. Take the retirement package the studio offered. You've earned it. Let the next generation handle the future. You don't understand modern film finance. You don't grasp the necessity of global saturation marketing in the first week. You were great in the 70s, sure, but your time is—" Before Leo could utter the final, damning phrase, a small yet devastating movement occurred. Clint Eastwood gently placed his napkin on the table. It was a gesture of finality. He had reached his limit, not of patience, but of tolerating foolishness. He slowly, deliberately, turned his head toward the waiter who had served the scallops, a young man named Michael, nervous and barely out of culinary school, who was visibly mortified by the director's outburst. "Michael." Clint's voice was a low rumble, the gravelly tone immediately recognizable. It was the first word he had spoken in 20 minutes, and it silenced the entire room instantly. "Sir?" Michael whispered, terrified. "Is there any room left in the world?" Clint asked, his eyes still locked on the young man, ignoring the sputtering director. "For a good steak, served without unnecessary noise?" Michael managed a weak smile. "Always, Mr. Eastwood." "Good," Clint murmured. "Bring me one, and bring one for every member of the kitchen staff. On my tab." 3. The intellectual moral virata. This small act of quiet dignity was the first earthquake. Leo's face flushed an angry crimson. He saw Clint connecting with the service staff, an act of genuine human respect, while simultaneously excluding the arrogant director from the conversation entirely. "Are you listening to me, old man? I'm talking about millions of dollars and creative integrity," Leo hissed, desperate to regain control. Clint finally turned his piercing gaze back to Leo. He did not raise his voice. He did not mention cinema, box office, or legacy. He chose the one topic that exposed Leo's true vulnerability: character. "Integrity." Clint repeated the word slowly, letting it hang in the thick air like a physical object. "Integrity is not measured by the speed of your cuts, son. It's measured by what you do when the camera isn't running." He paused, leaning slightly closer. This was his move, the short, devastating truth bomb. "Leo," Clint continued, his voice dropping to a near whisper that somehow resonated throughout the stunned room. "You confuse speed with purpose, and you confuse volume with authority. You spent this entire dinner belittling others, claiming you control the modern audience." He reached into his inner pocket and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper, a printout of an email. "I received this morning," Clint stated, his thumb smoothing the crease of the paper. "It's from the chairman of the board. It seems that your revolutionary marketing strategy for this picture exceeded budget by 40%, and the internal projections based on the test screening data show that the highest scores came directly from the scenes you attempted to cut, the ones based on human silence and emotional weight." The air went dead still. Leo's jaw dropped. He looked like a man who had walked confidently into a mirror. Clint laid the email on the table for everyone to see. Then he delivered the fatal blow, his eyes colder than the Sierra snow. "The chairman also mentioned that he asked me, personally, to direct the sequel, contingent on my methods, and that he was specifically advised to keep you away from the project." The silence that followed was absolute. Leo Vance, the man who had spent the last hour proclaiming his absolute power over the future of cinema, was revealed to be a mere pawn, a financially reckless liability who had just alienated the man the studio was actively trying to placate and empower. Suddenly, a loud, heavy footsteps approached the table from the back of the restaurant. It was William Astor, the owner of the Diplomat's Grill, a man known for his impeccable taste and his deep, long-standing friendships with old Hollywood royalty. William had been quietly watching the unfolding drama from the bar, recognizing the legend immediately. William, a man built like a retired linebacker, walked directly up to Leo Vance. His face was a mask of furious composure. "Mr. Vance," William's voice was low, dangerous. "You have just insulted an American institution, a patron of this restaurant for 40 years, and, I must add, the man who quietly paid for my mother's medical care when I was just starting out decades ago." Leo, scrambling to recover, stammered, "Wait, what? I didn't know." "You didn't know," William interrupted, his gaze scathing, "because you never took the time to look up from your phone, did you? You only see titles and budgets. You don't see people." William then turned to Clint, his entire demeanor changing to one of profound respect. "Clint, my apologies. I should have intervened sooner." "No need, William," Clint replied softly. "A man needs to discover his own limitations." William then returned his attention to Leo, pulling a pen from his jacket. He grabbed a napkin from the table, scribbled quickly, and placed it next to Leo's wine glass. "Mr. Vance, this establishment operates on respect. You have shown none. That piece of paper is a receipt for your outstanding bill, which you will pay in full before leaving, and effective immediately, you are permanently barred from the Diplomat's Grill. Get out." The humiliation was total. Leo Vance, stripped of his authority, his arrogance, and his future film prospects in the span of 3 silent, devastating minutes, scrambled to gather his coat, As he rushed past the other tables, avoiding eye contact, the waiters and busboys stood taller, a silent ovation for the quiet man who had defended dignity. As Leo stumbled out the door and back into the driving rain, William Astor returned to Clint's table, leaning down. "Clint, I heard you ordered food for the kitchen staff. Anything else I can get you?" Clint looked around the dining room, where every face was now smiling, relaxed, the atmosphere suddenly light and celebratory. "Yes, William," Clint said, his eyes finally showing a hint of warmth. "Could you tell young Michael to charge the entire restaurant's tab to my name? Everyone here deserves a better night than the noise that man brought in." The resulting cheer in the esteemed restaurant was the loudest moment of the evening, and it was a cheer born not of chaos, but of shared respect. 4. The reaction of the world. The details of the confrontation, especially the shocking email revelation and the permanent ban from the iconic restaurant, didn't stay quiet for long. Someone at an adjacent table had wisely captured the entire exchange on their phone, not the video of Clint, who insisted on privacy, but the audio of Leo's aggressive insults and the stunning silence that followed, concluding with the owner's decisive booming dismissal. The audio clip, titled "Silence Louder Than Thunder, Eastwood versus the Kid," went supernova. Within 6 hours, it was dominating the conversation across Hollywood trade journals and global news sites. Headlines screamed, Variety, Vance's career implodes at Diplomat's Grill. Eastwood reveals financial recklessness in quiet takedown. The Hollywood Reporter, The Price of Hubris. Data showed respect. Director chose arrogance. Chatta TMZ. Fired. Restaurant owner boots director for insulting Clint Eastwood. The clip garnered millions of views overnight. The viral moment wasn't the insult. It was the unflinching non-reaction of the legend, followed by the measured intellectual execution. Social media rallied around the concept of Eastwood's silence. People shared stories of times they had faced workplace bullying or condescension, concluding that the only true power is the power of quiet integrity. The narrative was clear. The young man relied on noise and data, but the elder statesman relied on character and long-term relationships, revealing who held the true authority. Leo Vance quickly released a boilerplate apology, which was immediately dismissed as transparent damage control. The studio, having confirmed Clint Eastwood's version of events and the financial overruns, quietly shifted Leo Vance to development hell, a fate worse than immediate firing. The world had witnessed a real-life Western played out over prime rib and fine china, where the fastest draw wasn't the one who shouted the loudest, but the one who possessed the most devastating truth. 5. The philosophical conclusion. The story of that night at the Diplomat's Grill became more than just Hollywood gossip. It became a powerful lesson about the enduring nature of true character. In a world increasingly dominated by fleeting trends, superficial aggression, and the relentless need for instant validation, we often confuse activity with productivity and volume with substance. We are taught to be quick, to react immediately, to defend ourselves loudly. But that night, Clint Eastwood showed us a different path. He demonstrated that dignity does not require a defense. He understood that the greatest strength is not the ability to shout down your enemy, but the ability to remain still, to maintain the core of your values until the storm of ego and incompetence defeats itself. The director tried to teach the legend about the new world, but the legend simply reminded him that the fundamental laws of character, humility, respect, and integrity are eternal. The silence that Clint Eastwood maintained throughout the initial attack was not weakness. It was a strategically loaded gun. He offered not revenge, but profound, humiliating clarity. He didn't seek to destroy the antagonist. He merely removed the foundation upon which his arrogance stood. And in that moment of quiet grace, the entire room, and eventually the world, was reminded that true power doesn't need a spotlight. It just needs unshakable, quiet certainty. The world needs more people like this. Share if you agree.